Peace. This is Jamal Robinson with 720astrology.com. And today we need to talk about the upcoming full moon that will occur on May 12th, 2025 at 22 degrees of Scorpio. This full moon is a big deal, but first let's review what the full moon is. The full moon is a point of culmination. It's where things come to the surface, and it is where the sun and the moon are looking at each other in the sky, which is why the moon is illuminated from the light of the sun. So we bring out what we've been working on or what's been going on in the dark, all comes up to the surface at the full moon. This moon, again, full moon, is a big deal because if we go back to November 1st, when we had the new moon at 9 degrees of Scorpio, then it gives us an indication of what type of seeds were being planted back then. So let's go back and think about this. November 1st, 2024, just a few days before the election. Think about the roller coaster ride that we've been on since November of 2024. It has been nonstop. Headline after headline, inflammatory statement after another, economy up and down, rumors of war, all types of things happening, the ports shutting down, people getting sick, plane crashes, what about aliens? All types of things have been thrown at us in just this little 6-month window. And so whenever we're looking at a full moon, we want to go back 6 months to get an idea of what has transpired and what is culminating at the time of the full moon. But there's other things that we need to look at, and this is where I want you to really dig in. Things have been tough. The tension in the air has been thick enough to cut it with a butter knife. But every tide must turn at some point. Now, even in the midst of still tense times, we have some signs of mercy that are on the horizon with this full moon. Why? Well, first let's go back and look at what was happening with Jupiter around the time of the new moon in November of 2024. At that time, Jupiter was at 20 degrees of Gemini and it was retrograde. It had turned retrograde on October 8th at 21 degrees of Gemini. It ended up moving back to 11 degrees of Gemini. So that is what we would call the shadow. The shadow would be the degree that the planet would retrograde back to, all the way up to the degree that the planet actually turned retrograde. Jupiter's shadow was from 11 degrees Gemini to 21 degrees of Gemini. So at the time of this new moon, Jupiter was retrograde at 20 degrees of Gemini. Okay? What is significant also is that during this phase of being direct and then retrograde, now back direct, Jupiter squared Saturn at 17 degrees of Gemini in August. Then in its retrograde phase, it squared Saturn at 13 degrees of Gemini back in December. Now Jupiter is preparing to square Saturn a final time, which will come up at the end of May and roll over into June. But here's the difference. Here's the difference. This time, when Jupiter squares Saturn, it has the upper hand. And I'm going to tell you why this is a big deal. Jupiter is a planet that we naturally associate with luck and abundance, with expansion. And Saturn is a planet that we associate with limitation and karma. Saturn is a taskmaster who comes in and says, nah, it's not time yet. So Saturn has had the upper hand with Jupiter because Jupiter has been in its detriment in Gemini. In addition to dealing with abundance and expansion, Jupiter deals with long distance planning and eyesight. Jupiter is perspective. Jupiter has been conflicted in this detriment in Gemini and receiving a square from Saturn. But the difference with this final square is that Jupiter will soon be moving into Cancer. This is a big deal because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. When Jupiter squares Saturn in Cancer, by that time, Saturn will be in Aries. Saturn is debilitated in Aries. So now Saturn does not have the strength that it normally would. And Jupiter, after being beat up in Gemini and not feeling like it has a strong sense of direction and perspective, is now being refreshed and renewed in Cancer, a space that allows it to expand. So now here's a chance for, if you did the work that Saturn was requiring while it was holding up the big idea and big plans of Jupiter, Saturn was forcing us to grind, endure, and do the work. Now, if we try to abandon our duties and responsibilities, then we're going to see the results of that. But if we dug in our heels and answered the call to do the work, this is the opportunity to see expansion. This full moon is releasing the tension that has been building over the last 6 months. And some people are going to see some expansion with this movement of Jupiter's energy into Cancer. And keep in mind that back during the new moon in November, that Mars was also at 29 degrees of Cancer. And Mars was in its shadow at the time, because Mars would eventually station retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo, and it would move back to 11 or 17 degrees of Cancer. Now in Cancer, Mars is debilitated. Mars does not function well in Cancer. It's like it's an energy that puts out its flame, so it makes it more volatile in its attempt to sustain its flame when it's in Cancer. So think, Mars has moved through Cancer and has caused all type of turmoil during this same period we're talking about. Well, by now, at this full moon, Mars has moved on. And not only has Mars moved on into Leo, it has cleared its shadow, because Mars has gone beyond the 6th degree of Leo. So that's another reason to pat yourself on the back and keep your head up and feel some hopefulness, because you survived Mars through Cancer. And now, after Mars has made its trek through Cancer, here comes Jupiter, exalted in Cancer. You see why I'm saying that this full moon is a big deal? This full moon is the setup. This full moon gives us an opportunity to release feelings of lack, feelings of want and desire, and to actually experience the possession of the dream, to actually see it start to form and crystallize. We also want to pay attention to the fact that Neptune was retrograde at the time of the new moon in Scorpio back in November. It was retrograde at 27 degrees of Pisces. Well, guess what? Neptune has also moved on into Aries. Pluto was at the anaretic degree, 29 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto has now moved into Aquarius. The difference is that it's in Aquarius for good. There are a lot of shifts that occurred in this 6-month period, and the heaviness that was experienced, the compression and the inflammation, literally inflammation in the blood with Mars and Cancer, and inflammation in our environment, the inflammatory nature of just being a human at this time. Now we get a little bit of mercy. Now we have an inkling of an opportunity, and windows don't open for long. This time where Jupiter has the upper hand with Saturn, you must capitalize. But here's the caveat. Saturn is in Aries, so you are still required to make sure that you are able to display some self-control, and that you are still able to be measured and display self-discipline. Otherwise, Jupiter will send you down a road of destruction, because all this expansion can lead to problems itself. There's a need for limitation. But if we learned what we needed to during this period, then we are ready for the expansion that awaits us. Hope this is a fruitful new season unfolding for you. As always, know the stars to know yourself. Jamal Robinson, 720astrology.com. Peace.